Casey is my call sign, so it's my initials, but it also stands for Killer Chicks.
That is really cool.
I gotta Google her.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Cockpits and Cocktails. I'm so excited because we have Casey Campbell with us, and she's got a really cool story. If you haven't heard about it, you will hear it. I am Natalie flyGIRL Kelley, and I'm here with
Alyssa. I'm so excited. I was reviewing some things. I was Googling you, of course.
So excited that you did this and took time out of your evening to do this. So we really appreciate that.
It's been a pretty interesting ride. I mean, just looking back.
I actually met Casey at Oshkosh through Heather Penny, who was also a guest of ours previously. Two badass female pilots.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking having Heather. I was trying to tell people about the Heather episode because that kind of leads into this episode. And I'm like, how cool to kind of lay the groundwork for women as military pilots. It's
been a pretty interesting ride. I mean, just looking back, I started flying in the military in 2001 is when I started flying A-10s, and it is just the landscape in terms of the number of women flying now has changed so dramatically. And
Absolutely.
It's really exciting to see.
Yeah, I think the Fifi or Nicole, I remember when Nicole was on, she was talking about how she felt like she kind of started to see a change when she started flying as well. So that's cool. That's exciting to hear. And, with women that show the bravery that you have, and Heather and Nicole, and it just shows that it's possible. Women can be great fighter combat pilots and military pilots and be successful and do very heroic things.
It's funny. I've known Nicole Fifi since I was 12. So we go way back.
Wow.
We met each other when we were in Civil Air Patrol, both with aspirations of going to the Air Force Academy and becoming fighter pilots. So she now lives a mile from me, and it's just cool to look back and look where we were when we were 12 with just these goals and dreams, and just to see where we've come after all these years.
Cool. Yeah, so it's like this friend all along.
Yeah.
So if you start from the beginning, was it Civil Air Patrol? What got you into aviation? Was your family into it? What's the beginning?
The beginning is the Challenger disaster. I know that might sound a little crazy, but for me, it was this moment in 5th grade. I mean, I don't even know. I don't think I really understood what it was then, but I think watching it on TV and feeling just so really just devastated, but also connected in a way of realizing these astronauts died doing something that was bigger than them, that something that they believed in, something that they were willing to give their lives for. I don't know. I connected with it and decided it really very quickly after that I wanted to be an astronaut. And my dad had been in the Air Force for a period of time, and I asked him, what's the best way to become an astronaut? And he said, well, most of the astronauts have gone to the Air Force Academy and gone on to be fighter pilots. And so I was like, all right, that's what I want to do. And in 5th grade, told my dad that. I don't think he thought I would stick with it. But it really just kind of set me up for, wanting to start flying, getting into Civil Air Patrol. All of these things really helped prepare me to get to the point where I could actually go to the academy and compete for pilot training.
Wow. Well, that kind of reminds me of actually Nicole's story, and maybe that's just how it needs to be with people that aspire to go in the military. You really have to have that kind of plan and foundation kind of early on. Maybe that helps you be successful, because then you can kind of start laying out what you need to do, when you get to high school, and how you need to perform and to be on that track. Would you agree?
I think for the service academies, that really helps to have some of those things, to set you up. I would say that prior to that, I mean, I was interested in school, but it wasn't really this passion. My parents would say I spent more time trying to do cheerleading and pageants than anything else. And when I decided I wanted to be an astronaut, it was a switch. I did my homework without asking. I really started to get involved in things. I found my goal. I found my mission. I actually had a little gold star that it was cut out of like cardboard that I hung from the ceiling in my room that said "Reach for the stars," and it was just kind of my reminder of what I really wanted to go after. And so it was from that point on, it was really my path and kept me doing the right things and kept me competitive to be able to go to the Air Force Academy.
Isn't it funny how when we actually apply ourselves to something that we're interested in, how much better we perform? And I wish that people at young ages could find those things that they're really passionate about. And I look back to my high school and I was like, I was not interested in anything. And you talk about beauty pageants, you know, it's like I was in all the sports and all the things, but that didn't like set me up for what was next and figuring that out. So I think that's really funny that you're beauty pageant gone A-10 pilot.
Yeah. I tell our cadets at the Air Force Academy that in terms of when they ask me what should they do with their careers or what should they major in, and the one piece of advice I say is find something that you love, right? Find something that you're going to enjoy, because if you're going to spend 5 years or 10 years doing it, or even 4 years at college studying something, like if you enjoy it, you're going to do so much better.
It'll be easier.
You're in it, like it's your interest as opposed to doing something that somebody else wants you to do. It makes such a big difference if it's your goal, what you want to go after.
Force it, it's not good. So you're like your dad. He was in the Air Force. Is that correct? Yeah. Did he have was he trying at all to persuade you to go that direction?
I think if anything, my dad probably would have swayed me the other way. I think it was hard for him. You know, when he was at the Air Force Academy, there were no women. And so he had this idea of his little girl going off to the academy. And so I think
different world.
As any parent would be, just a little nervous. But once I was like, this is what I'm going to do, he helped me work out. He helped me build my upper body strength in terms of we hung a pull-up bar in the bathroom so that I could do pull-ups going in and out. I would run the hills with him near our house in my combat boots, so they were all broken in and ready to go. So I think he was nervous, but he really became my biggest supporter in terms of helping me be ready, because it was really important to be ready, not just mentally, but physically as well, so that I could do the best that I could, which would set me up for success in terms of getting a pilot slot.
Yeah.
So you mean you just can't show up and be like, I'm ready to train now?
That would be awesome, but no. Unfortunately, the pilot slots are pretty competitive. It kind of depends based on the year and the needs of the Air Force, but it is very competitive, and it's with everything you do. The harder you work at it, then you put yourself in a position to get what you want. So
how does the pilot slot work? Do you just join the Air Force and then test for that, or how do you go about finding what you're going to be accepted into?
Part of it is at the Air Force Academy anyway. Part of it is your order of merit, so how well you do, and that includes your academics, your athletics, your military. So it's everything combined in an order of merit. But there's also it wasn't this way when I was there, but there is now testing associated with it, and flight hours, things like that will help you. And you go through kind of some testing to see how you do with certain tasks, and the better you do, the higher score you get. So all of that goes in together. But really, a lot of it is your order of merit and how well you do while you're there, and it will help put you in a position to kind of pick. So you get your dream sheet, if you will, which is how you end up choosing an airplane later too. It's a dream sheet, and the better you do, you end up in a position where you can choose what you want.
Yeah. So the airplane that you wound up flying, tell us about how you got into flying the A-10.
So when I was at pilot training, I realized that I absolutely loved flying the low levels. Anytime we could get down low, it was something that I don't know. It was enjoyable. I really liked it, and so I started thinking about, okay, what airplanes can I go fly low? And then started talking to people about the missions of the different fighters. I knew I wanted to go fighters. I just wasn't exactly sure which fighter I wanted to take or what I would be competitive for. And I started learning about the A-10, and specifically with the A-10, it was all about the mission of supporting our troops on the ground. And I don't know, that just stuck with me in terms of if that was something I could go do in combat, to be able to help our troops that are out on the ground and help them get home safely. I just really connected with it. And so for me, that was what it was about. I mean, it started out with this, I'd love to go fly at 100 feet and rage around the mountains and do all these fun things, which is still really fun. And I still like that a lot about the A-10. But the mission for me of supporting our troops on the ground was really the most important.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So when you go through, you're at the Air Force Academy, what are you doing in terms of flying at that point? When do you find out what you're going to be flying?
It takes a while. So first you get your pilot slot out of the Air Force Academy, and then you spend a year at pilot training, going through different training in different military training aircraft. So first we started out in a T-37, just a side-by-side trainer, and then from there you will select a different route if you want to go helicopters, or if you want to go the heavy aircraft or cargo planes, or if you want to go fighters, that you kind of split in these different tracks. And so I was able to go to the T-38 route, which is the route that we go with fighters. And again, it's constant evaluation and check rides and trying to do your best at all of these things and academics and everything to go with it. And then at the end, you get racked and stacked, and depending upon your performance, and you put your dream sheet in, and then they choose what based on your performance and based on what you want. That's how you end up with the fighter in my case that is really the best fit. It also depends on what's available in the Air Force at the time. So there is a little bit of luck and timing that goes into it, but it was pretty exciting to actually on the night, on assignment night where we get the drops, they put you up on stage and they kind of build it up a little bit, and then they flash behind you a picture of the airplane. And I remember turning around the A-10, and it was just like really cool, really exciting.
That is cool. Yeah.
That is really cool.
Is your time in the Air Force Academy, I have no idea what that would be like. Is it stressful? Is it fun? What is it like to be in the Air Force Academy?
It's all of the above. I mean, it's stressful because it's difficult in terms of the academics are very hard, but it's time management of trying to do a lot of different things because you have all of the military requirements and training, the athletics, everything. It's just a struggle in time management and trying to figure out how to do it and be good at it. But at the same time, I've met some of the best friends there, friends that will be my friends for life, just going through some of the challenges that we went through, whether it was our basic training, which is kind of the boot camp part of it, to some of our survival training, being out in the woods and, just, trying to survive off limited food and navigate through the mountains of Colorado. I think it's just, you make connections that will last a lifetime.
Yeah, I can see that. So tell me about what is this piece of airplane that you have behind you?
Yeah, so that is a piece of my A-10 from Iraq.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's the tail, the back tail section. And the reason I have it is because after I flew the airplane on a mission, it unfortunately never flew again. Had a few too many holes, non-repairable. And so I've got
And you got to take one home.
I got to take a piece of it home, which was pretty nice. Once they realized it wasn't going to fly anymore, they said, "Hey, do you want to cut the piece of the tail out?" I was like, "Can I do that?" Yeah. So they cut it out for me, and it's kind of nice. It's a little bit of a memory of probably one of the most difficult missions I've ever flown in my entire life.
Yeah. So can you tell us, to the listeners, a little bit about what that was?
Sure. So this was back in 2003, so it's been a little while, but this was at the start of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and our squadron was deployed to Kuwait to support our troops on the ground. And it had gotten to the point in April, pretty difficult situation on the ground. Our troops were taking fire constantly, and so our regular mission was we'd take off from Kuwait, we'd fly up to Baghdad, which is about 300 miles, about an hour in an A-10, and we'd air refuel, so we'd be ready to go. And then they would put us in these stacks, which were stacks of airplanes surrounding Baghdad so that when the call came in, we were ready to go, and they would just kind of funnel airplanes in as needed. But this day, the weather was terrible. We couldn't see the ground below, and back then the A-10 doesn't have the capabilities that it does now. For us, it was always we needed to see a fight visually so that we could employ our weapons. We weren't really sure that we were going to be able to do anything, but we were just waiting to see what would happen. And we got a call from a ground forward air controller who said they were taking fire and they needed immediate assistance. And we just knew that we had to get there as quickly as possible. Flew right over the top of the target and then started looking for holes in the weather so that we could just dive down through, get below the clouds, and see what we could do to help them out. And I remember, we were in formation, and then my flight lead's like, I see a hole. And he just kind of peeled off and disappeared below me and then said, all right, it's your turn, find a hole in the clouds, come down through. And so I just did my best, found a hole in the clouds and dove down below the weather. And then it was just almost surreal because I could see this firefight. I mean, we were so low now that I could see tracers and smoke going back and forth across the river. It was just this massive firefight, and we were trying to figure out how to get in as quickly as possible. When at about that time, we're talking about how we're going to set up and do our weapons delivery passes, and I suddenly see this bright flash next to my cockpit. And, I'm kind of looking outside and I see, then this gray smoke and white smoke. And I kind of this moment of shock, what's happening? And, it's very quickly and realize that not only is there a firefight going on across the river back and forth with the enemy, but they're also shooting at us too. And so we just decided we needed to get in there as quick as we could to take the pressure off our friendly troops. And we did a couple passes, and that was all we were going to do, just based on the threat and the risk level. And so we did our couple passes, and it was my last pass, which was a rocket pass. So we did everything to set up, to make sure my distance from the target was correct, my altitude, all my switches, and then rolled in, pointed my nose right underneath this bridge where the enemy was hiding, and 7 rockets went down on the enemy, and then just pulled really hard to get away from the ground, away from the threat. When I was just back of the cockpit, it was like a car crash. It was just instant I knew immediately I'd been hit. I mean, it was a bright flash. It dumped the airplane nose low. I remember looking down and I could see Baghdad below me. I remember pulling back on the stick, and nothing happened. I mean, the airplane did nothing.
Wow.
And it's, it's that moment of an emergency of there's nobody else in that airplane that's going to do anything but me. And I just remember thinking, I looked down at those ejection handles and I thought, not yet. The last thing I want to do is eject and ride a parachute down into the enemy. And so I did what we do in every emergency, which was attempt to maintain aircraft control, which I really couldn't. But it was trying to analyze what happened. So, trying to analyze the situation as quickly as I could. And we had master caution lights flashing. We have a panel over on our side, and it was lit up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
But at the top, we have 2 lights for hydraulic pressure and reservoir, and they were both on for the left side and the right side. And then right above that are these gauges, and I remember looking at them, and the hydraulics were at 0. And so, at this point, there was only one thing I could do other than eject, and that was to flip a switch. We have a backup emergency system called manual reversion. Flipped the switch, and thankfully, as I pulled back on the stick, the airplane then started to climb out and away from Baghdad. It's kind of that first moment of all right, I might actually make it out of here alive.
Wow.
Yeah, so that all happened. That was a matter, I think, I went back and looked, and I think it was 20 seconds between getting all of that happening. But I remember so many things, mostly Baghdad kind of getting closer with the realization of the last thing I need right now is to eject. So it was really about survival and doing everything I could to kind of maintain composure in that really crucial moment and rely on all the training that I've had.
Wow. So what was your altitude kind of at that point?
I was at about 6,900 feet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we normally operate in the A-10 at about 15 to 20,000 feet. And so this was a little bit lower. So when I got hit, I was at roughly 7,000 feet. I don't remember exactly how much altitude I lost, but it was enough to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the situation. Not to
Yeah.
mention they were still shooting at us. So,
So I'm sure you practice like tons of like emergency things all the time, right?
we do, and that's the thing. I think that in that moment, I didn't have time to think about it. I didn't have time to ask for help. I didn't even have time to open my checklist. It was just react. And we do. I mean, that's the thing. I really believe in chair flying and walking through and thinking through emergencies before they happen, because in that moment, there's no time to really, it happens so fast. And so you just have to be able to rely on your training. So we practice emergencies in a simulator. We chair fly them. All through my training, I chair flew every mission I flew the night before, because it's like a freebie, right? To sit down in front of my printed then cockpit display and just think through the mission, think through radio calls. But I always did the what if, like, okay, what if this goes wrong? What if this happens? And then I think in that moment, when that worst case scenario does happen, you're ready. And ideally you perform at your best. I mean, that's what you're hoping for, that in that moment you can recall all those things that you trained for.
I think that takes chair flying to a whole nother level when you're doing that kind of a mission, and your life is at stake, other people's lives are at stake, and so you really have to know what your mission is, and just go through what ifs. Because the second that I read this story, I was thinking like, well, she can't eject there, because like, what if they catch her?
Yeah.
No,
I thought that too.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's something you definitely thought of after the fact. And
we brief it, right? So we fly in a two ship. So there was another A-10 about a mile from me. And we sit down before the mission and we talk about the worst case scenario. We call it wounded bird. So somebody's been hit. Now what do you do? And I will tell you that we having a wingman, right? Having somebody next to me when that happened was critical, because for me, I was so focused on flying the airplane. I mean, that was all my little bubble shrunk to right in front of me, but he had this awareness to, one, tell me to fly to the west, because the friendlies were over on the west. And so in his mind, if I had to eject, at least I had a chance of riding a parachute down into the friendlies. He also told me to emergency jettison all of my ordnance. So we carry a lot of bombs, a lot of missiles, and it's heavy. And once I told him I was in manual reversion, he was like, emergency jettison everything now. And as soon as I hit the button to emergency jettison everything, now I could start climbing. But, just having that wingman there to support me and tell me to continue putting out chaff and flare, which is our system that we put out to try to, if there was another missile, ideally the missile would bite off on the chaff and flare instead of my airplane. But I just, I was so focused on flying and trying to recover the airplane that I just didn't have the brain bites to do that. And so I think that's the other important piece to this, right? I didn't do it by myself. I had a wingman there to help me kind of in that really difficult moment.
And tell you what's going on around your aircraft, because you can't see in that cockpit, see what had happened. So your entire tail could have been gone, and, that would affect your landing or, whatever.
Yeah, we have mirrors in the cockpit, and I remember once I got out of Baghdad, right, and now I'm like, okay, I got to breathe a little bit of sigh of relief, above the weather, feel like it's not so much of a threat. At this point, I'm like, okay, what just happened? What? I know that I don't have hydraulics, but I don't really know why, other than a missile impacted the back of my airplane. And he did what we call battle damage check, so he flew right next to me and kind of did the look over of the airplane. And I remember him saying, you have hundreds of holes in the fuselage and tail, and then a hole about the size of a football in the back horizontal stabilizer, which is the back tail section of the plane. And I remember thinking, that doesn't sound very good, but I'm happy the airplane is still flying.
It's still flying.
It's still flying. But I knew, because I was in this backup system called manual reversion, which is really just like old school cranks and cables, allowing you to fly under more mechanical mode. I knew that I had a decision to make of either fly the airplane back to friendly territory and eject, or fly the airplane back and attempt to land. And so that was probably, other than in that moment reacting, that was a really hard decision because I felt like, what if I made the wrong choice? I mean, I really felt like it was almost a life and death decision. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And, the good news is I had an hour to fly and get comfortable flying the airplane. And I remember
reacting to.
Yeah, I remembered stories from pilots who had flown before me in Desert Storm who had talked about flying in manual reversion. And so I remembered their stories. That's why I think it's so important to share war stories or hangar stories. That's why you do it, right? Because somebody else can learn
Right.
from it. And all of those things weighed into my decision of attempting to land the airplane. But it was nerve-wracking. I mean, that's an hour to think through all the terrible things that could happen.
Right. I was going to say, after a very stressful hour, just like, hopefully I'll make it at least just a little bit longer. So I'm trying to think through a little bit more what I'm going to do, plan a little bit.
Yeah, in some ways, having the time was really good because I felt very comfortable flying. After I flew the airplane for an hour, I felt really good about it. But it's a long time to think about the possibility of crashing on landing. I mean, I tried not to think about that, but we talked about it. We talked about all the things that could go wrong. We talked about actually landing at a base in Iraq that at this point the U.S. military had owned. And we chose to overfly the base because they didn't have a crash recovery. They had one fire truck and there was no hospital. So we went through that mindset of like, okay, well, if you crash, and then there's no ambulance or hospital to go to, that's not really a good situation. So let's go all the way back to Kuwait. So we had to really talk about some of those things, but it was tough. Just trying to compartmentalize and think about focusing on that task at hand is really all that I could do.
Was it what happened? Pretty exhausting, like flying the plane, like in this reversion mode?
Yes. So other than the mental exhaustion of like trying to keep my brain on track of just going through all the emergency checklists multiple times, but also physically exhausting. So because you're just flying on trim tabs, it's just the airplane is harder to control. I try to give an example, and the best thing that I have come up with that really was shared with me was it's like driving a dump truck without power steering. It's just harder. It's like nothing moves quite right. And the other problem I had was I had emergency jettisoned everything but a pod it's an electronic countermeasure pod, but it's hardwired to the airplane, and it was out of my left wing, which meant that the airplane, if I let go of the stick, would just wanted to do these aileron rolls. Not really a great thing when you have no hydraulics. And so it really was fighting that the whole way. And I remember again from pilots that had flown in manual reversion before me that had said, look, fly with both hands on the stick, fly, change left, right hand, and just so that you're not exhausted when it comes time to land. But yeah, I will tell you, I was pretty dang exhausted when after I landed, probably because, there was a lot of adrenaline as well.
Yeah.
Well, after landing in that kind of situation, I'm sure with the military, you always have like kind of a debrief of everything. But like, what did the hours after that mission look like? Or, I mean, did you sneak in a nap? Like,
so yeah, after landing, I debriefed first. We did what we do after every mission, was just a debrief, mostly because we wanted to get the word out about the threats in the area and to share that with other pilots. So we did a debrief as we flew back. We did a debrief when we landed, just to talk about, yes, it was successful because I landed the airplane successfully, but we wanted to kind of pull out those lessons learned. The thing I remember most was actually going to the chow hall to eat, because this was an really early morning mission, and walking into the chow hall. And I remember opening the door and just feeling like this room full of hundreds of people just suddenly stopped and turned to like stare at me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was one of, I think, 3 women pilots on the base, but word had spread rapidly about what had happened. And so I just remember walking in and realizing that everybody was staring at me and kind of spreading the story about what had happened. And there was a Marine pilot there. We shared the base with the Marines, and he walked up to me afterwards and he was like, hey, Casey, great, really nice landing. So were you scared? And I was like, no, I'm a fighter pilot. Like, fighter pilots don't get scared, right? We're invincible. total lie, by the way. And I thought, well, I didn't have time to be scared, right? That was what I told myself. Didn't have time to be scared. But we record everything that we do in the cockpit. So I went back and watched the video. And
That'd be interesting.
I was terrified, right? I can hear my voice. I mean, it was probably one of the most terrifying moments of my life. But I go back to this point, like, yeah, you know what? It's hard to admit it, right? But it's what you do when you are scared, right? If you're scared, and yeah, I think we've all been there, but if you can actually take action in that moment. But I just remember telling that Marine, like, nope, I wasn't scared. Fighter pilots don't get scared.
That reminds me of
until you have an emergency in the airplane, and then
yeah,
it's terrifying.
Yeah,
totally.
It reminds me of Heather's her situation, and it's like, oh, you just go back to your normal daily routines and everything's back to normal, and then the next day they throw you in a plane again because you don't have time to think. I mean, you have time to think about it, but you probably really hit you later on and not that day or, the real.
Yeah, so the next day, one of the things that we do in the A-10 also is combat search and rescue. And so we would sit alert, which means we'd be right out in these shacks next to our airplanes, and just usually meant you sleep, you read, whatever. And I think they probably put me on combat search and rescue alert just to give me a down day, like just to give me a little bit of a breather. And then, of course, what happens is we got launched because the alarm sounded, and we got launched because an A-10 pilot had been shot down. And so I just remember, I didn't think about flying again. I just ran to the jet as fast as I could, put on all my gear, and we took off, because those guys had been there for me the day before. They weren't sure if I was going to make it back. So they were ready to go to come get me. I was going to do the same for this pilot that was on the ground. And so I didn't have time to think about it. I just got in the airplane and took off, and we made it about 30 minutes into Iraq and learned he had been picked up by ground troops, friendly ground troops. Mm-hmm. But that was my way of getting back in the airplane. And then it was just like, well, I did it once, I can do it again. And I think I just really compartmentalized the whole thing, just didn't think about it a lot until after I got home. I mean, there was a war going on, and they needed every pilot that they could get to fly missions. So I kind of went back to my whole purpose of flying the A-10, which was supporting our troops on the ground, and I knew that I needed to continue to do that. So I think that's really how I kind of got through it. But you're right, it was just like, well, yep, war's going on, get right back in the airplane, get right back into it, get back in the air.
Yeah. I've heard a lot about the A-10. I think probably after your stories, when I heard it, you may have heard before because you were talking about other pilot stories. That airplane is a very kind of reminds me of what I've heard about, like the B-17. It can really take a lot to get it down.
Yeah, it's an impressive airplane. I mean, it was built to take hits while performing its mission because the primary mission was to support the ground troops. So everything from the pilot sits in a titanium bathtub. I mean, it's a tub around the pilot to protect us against enemy fire. The cockpit and the canopy has protection against small arms fire. Our fuel tanks have this protective foam lining so that if they do get a hit, the intent is that there's no fire. Which I can attest to. It's built so that if you lose one hydraulic system, then the other takes over, and if you lose both, it's a backup emergency system. It's when my airplane was hit, there was a fire. I mean, the back of the airplane was charred and covered with hydraulic fluid. The engine, my number 2 engines, so 2 engines in the A-10. But the number 2 engine actually took some shrapnel damage and just kept turning, just continued to work despite the shrapnel damage. And my flight lead actually told me that he said, on the way back, because he just followed me the whole way back. And he said, there's pieces of your airplane coming off on the way back because I didn't really want to tell you because it didn't seem to be something relevant at the point, which, is good. He asked me a lot about my engine. I was like, why do you keep asking me about my engine? I have a hydraulic problem, not an engine problem. And then I get out and look at the engine, and it's got holes all over it. So
yeah, not to panic you, but your engine also is about to fall apart.
Yeah, he told me enough to keep me informed, but not too much that I would have, you know, just had more to worry about. So.
Yeah. That was good thinking. So when you, how much longer were you actually over there?
So that was April, and we went home in July. So several months.
Yeah.
Of flying. So
yeah,
there's just you know, there is a war going on, and I wanted to be part of it just because those were my brothers and sisters out there, you know, in the air that we were flying with and on the ground, and you want to. You know, nobody wants to go to war, but if it happens, that's what we were trained to do.
All right. Yeah.
I recently read a story online about a girl that had a aviation incident, and you know, she was like, well, do you tell your family? Do you tell them what's going on? I mean, at that time, I mean, did you tell anybody what had happened, or can you tell anybody what had happened, or?
So my husband is also an A-10 pilot, and he happened to be on the ground deployed with a special forces unit, so he wasn't there flying at the time. Thank goodness he was sleeping when it happened, because he didn't have to hear about it in real time and wonder what was going to happen. And so I had called him on a secure phone line after the event, and since he was asleep, his intelligence officer left him a note, and it said, "Hey, your wife got hit over Baghdad. You should give her a call, but she's okay."
But she's okay.
She's okay. And then my squadron commander actually had me call my parents, which I did not want to do. The last thing I wanted to do was tell my parents, just because they would worry, and of course they were worried already. But I called them at like 1 a.m. in California and woke them up and just was like, "Hey, just so you know, I'm okay. Had a rough day, but just want you to know I'm good." And then my dad, because of his time in the military, had a friend of a friend of a friend ended up sending pictures. This was early ages of digital cameras, so he got a few pictures on email, and so I was thankful I called them, because I would have hated for them to find out.
For them to know. And
So, and I didn't have kids at the time, so my kids, you know, that wasn't really a factor. But we've since talked about it. My kids are now 8 and 12, and my older son actually, I think, might have Googled me one day and was like,
"Mom,
what's the story about?" So, yeah, you know, it's one of those things now. It's a little bit easier for them to, you know, to share and talk about. But at the time, I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want anybody to worry. Little did I know that, you know, CNN and, you know, different news outlets would make such a big deal out of it.
Yeah. So how does it feel talking about that? We talked a little bit about because of this mission, you received the Distinguished Flying Cross. And we were talking a little bit about, well, for me, I just wondered if it was like surreal, because I'm reading all the names of some of these people, like Jimmy Doolittle, and, you know, all these astronauts, and Jackie Cochran, who received it, to think, wow, I actually received that too. Like, what does that feel like?
It's humbling, I think, more than anything. You know, in the moment when I heard that I was going to receive the Distinguished Flying Cross, it was just like, wow, am I worthy to receive that? I feel like I was just doing my job, and I was supporting our troops on the ground. And I mean, it was an incredible honor, don't get me wrong, but when you look at the list of names of people that have received that,
like, wow.
It feels a little overwhelming. But I'm thankful that for the honor. I will tell you that one of the things that I have that probably means more to me than anything else in terms of recognition is a note that I got from some troops on the ground. And I wasn't in the squadron, but they came by to say thank you. And so they scribbled a little note for me that said, "Thanks for saving our ass over Baghdad," and signed their names to it. And like, that's what matters, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why I have done, you know, that's why I love flying the A-10. That's why I love, you know, absolutely love what I do, is because of that. And that to me means more than anything.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, you did deserve it, by the way. And thank you so much for your service and for doing that. You know, I mean, I just respect the military so much, and and what they do. And I'm sure, the guys on the ground, they're trained to do their thing, but it's risky, it's scary, and you all have to kind of work together in order to try to save as many lives as you possibly can. And you're not doing it, I know, to try to earn the Distinguished Flying Cross. You're doing it because you care about those people. Those are people with families, and you want to do all you can to save them. And I think that is very heroic.
Well, that's exactly why I chose the A-10, and I think it's nice to know that you make a difference. I think, when you think about what you want to do with your life and, in terms of the goals that I've set for myself, like I know that some of the things that I have done in combat have helped people get home safely to their families. And so knowing that I've made a difference and knowing that I can make an impact, I think that's what's been really important to me.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Awesome.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is another Heather Pinckney
Yeah.
Goosebumps episode.
Yeah.
Now, after that trip over there, how many more missions, or did you fly the A-10? Are you flying the A-10 now? Like, what is your transition after flying?
So I had about 300 hours in the A-10 at the time, so I was a fairly junior wingman. And I have now close to 2,000 hours in the airplane. Sadly, I'm not flying the A-10 anymore. It's, I took an assignment to the Air Force Academy. And so now I'm flying the T-53, which is a Cirrus. And I don't get to shoot the gun. I don't get to drop bombs anymore, but I get to teach cadets about flying and talk to cadets about flying and convince some of them that, or not convince them, but get to show them all the amazing things that flying has to offer. So it's not the same. I do miss it, but I love getting the opportunity to kind of impact the next generation of pilots.
You mean they don't just have like an A-10 sitting there for you to go fly every day?
That's awesome. But no,
I mean, can't you at least like pay the fuel and take one out?
Right. That would be so awesome.
Right. So what is your actual title now? What do you do in the Air Force?
So now I am the director for the Center for Character and Leadership Development at the Air Force Academy. And so I get an opportunity to work with cadets and our faculty and staff in their professional development. So,
that's really awesome.
From coming from a young wingman, not very much experience, I've had the opportunity throughout my career to be a squadron commander, so in charge of about a couple hundred people, and then moving on to a group commander, which I was in charge of more like 1,000 people. And so I've had a lot of leadership and life lessons along the way. And I will tell you that mission that I had over Iraq kind of set the stage for everything for me, because I got to see, what it was like to be in a unit that really worked together well to accomplish the mission. And so I've loved the opportunity to lead and be responsible for now young airmen and now young cadets, hearing the stories about, the things that I've experienced during my career. Just like pilots before me have shared their experience, now it's my chance to give back a little bit and share with them.
Yeah.
Were you still flying the A-10 when you had children, or were you in this role? Like, how is that transition to becoming a mom and flying an A-10? I mean, that's pretty badass.
I was flying A-10s really up until the last few years. So yeah, I have.
Wow.
My kids got to experience a little bit of it. We'd take them out to the flight line and they'd be more interested in the fire trucks, quite honestly, than the airplane. Right when my last assignment, when I was flying A-10s, we did get them the opportunity to go in the simulator. They got to climb up in an A-10. So now they think it's actually pretty cool. But when they were little, they didn't care. I mean, they thought the fire trucks were pretty cool, and we're happy to climb over a fire truck. And we're like, these airplane things are just making noise all around us.
Do you think either of your kids are interested in aviation or maybe military? Or, I mean, do you see any of those kind of wheels turning?
I do. Yeah, they are. My older son has interest in going to the Air Force Academy. And then my younger son has decided that he's going to go to West Point, so that he wants to be in the Army, to be in the Special Forces, which scares me, of course. But we'll see. We'll see. I had a lot of different goals in mind growing up, and you never know what sticks, but I just want
Yeah.
them to find what they enjoy and love to do.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've done. They want to serve. It sounds like so you've done an amazing job, kind of passing that on. That's something that was important to you, and they feel that desire too. That's cool.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun to see, and they'll do it in their own way, and there's no pressure. I mean, I just again, you always just want your kids to find something that they love and are passionate about. So we'll see. I mean, they're 8 and 12; they've got time.
True.
That's awesome.
So what's next? I mean, I know you do like some speaking engagements and things like that, but your military career, what's the plan? What's in the future for you?
So I will retire this summer after 24 years of service.
Wow.
Crazy. It's been so much a part of my life. So I will retire this summer, and my husband retired last summer. So we're slowly transitioning and figuring it out. But I have, over the past few years, I've been working on a book. So my goal and my hope is that I will get that book out and get it published.
Yeah.
That just shares some of the stories, the flying experiences, and the lessons learned. And then I do hope to continue speaking. I mean, COVID's been a really interesting time. Yeah. And, we're all anxious to get back to things like Oshkosh and different events out there. And I would love to be able to get out and share a little bit more of the story. And I love connecting with people and sharing kind of those lessons that people shared with me. I think that's important. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So looking forward to a little bit of time off and a little bit of downtime and decompression time and travel time when we get back to that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I would think being in the military, it's kind of like I guess maybe a bittersweet chapter ending, kind of thing. That's been your life for a long time. And I know it's like a family. I'm sure that it's like the aviation community. We talk about it all the time on the podcast. It's so great. But then you've got, it seems like an even more special family, the military family and the aviation thing. And you'll, like you said before, I know you've made friendships and you'll have these people in your lives for a very long time, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is hard. I think, especially if I look back to my early deployments, I mean, you make such a connection with people when you go to combat together. And those are relationships that will last. And so, yeah, it's a little bit sad because, I know I'm closing that chapter, and but I know that I will still stay in touch with all of those people. And, that just being retired won't change that. But yeah, you're right. It's a family. It's been our family for 24 years and 28 if you count my time at the Air Force Academy. So it's been a long time, a good portion of my life. So it is a little bit sad, but at the same time, I'm excited for what comes next.
I'm excited for the book.
Me too. I'm already like, please get it out. I want to read it. And I'm thinking about earlier, you mentioned war stories, and coming out of your mouth, it's hilarious to me because, like, what is she talking about? War stories? Like, war stories are for like old grumpy men in the military back, way back when. And so it's really cool to have somebody on the podcast that, has these war stories, but is a female and that has been there and experienced all these things. And that's what I love about the podcast, is just being able to share these stories with other people and make connections. And then, everybody has these little things that they might connect, but they might not who you are until this podcast, or, it's just so cool that aviation is so connected in that way. And so, I think
I absolutely love that. It's a way, no matter how you came about to get there, like there's just
doesn't matter.
Common stories and lessons. And I think that's what's fun about it, which is, why I really enjoyed my time at Oshkosh. It was just such a, exciting environment. People came from all over the world really that are passionate about aviation and want to talk about aviation. And I just met so many people that were so excited to just hear stories about flying, and I'm happy to share.
Yeah.
I can only imagine being in a circle with you at SOS tent at Oshkosh and being like, "Oh, tell us your best story."
Yeah.
And I'd be like, "Well,
yeah,
the best story."
Yeah.
So one of the people that I met at Oshkosh, which was just a cool story for me, was I met the woman that we call Bitchin' Betty, right? So in the airplane, we have a female voice that will say like altitude, altitude, or pull up.
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
And I met the woman who did all the recordings for the
gosh.
A-10. It was really cool. We were chatting, and I was like, could you say something? Like, could you actually just pull up for me? Like, I wanted to hear it.
Terrain,
Yeah.
pull up.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was an actual person. I thought it was just a computerized voice.
Yeah, they're actual people. Yeah, they're different people from different airplanes, but that's the thing, somehow it's just the stories that people have, and you just love and meet different people. It's a really incredible experience.
Well, speaking of Bitchin' Betty, so KC stands for what?
Killer chick.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
kids know
is
that.
easier to say. So yeah, nobody really calls me Killer Chick, but that is the official call sign that I was given. We don't pick our own call signs; they're given to us.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
I want to say, when you were talking about your book, you're and the people at Oshkosh, like all those people would be so interested in your book. I'm thinking about, I love military, I love aviation.
Yeah.
I love that you're a woman telling these stories. You have a huge audience that I know, and the character building and the things like that you talk about, all that stuff that's important to you, and you've got a lot to really share with people.
Well, thank you. It gives me confidence to actually get out there and publish it. So I spent a few years writing it, and now I need to focus on actually publishing it.
Yeah, I'll definitely.
That's amazing.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate all that you've done, and I love that you're still sharing your story and you were willing to come on here and talk to us. If people wanted to find you online, where could they find you?
Best place would be through LinkedIn. So Kim Campbell on LinkedIn is the best way, and I love having the opportunity to share with people, and whether it's providing advice or sharing stories or just connecting. I'd love that.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for all you've done for our military and our country, and all the troops out there. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Cross again in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Cockpits and Cocktails with me, Natalie flyGIRL Kelley, Casey Campbell, and
Bye, Alyssa.
Cheers, ladies.